With God in Russia. The story of an American Jesuit priest who spent 15 years of cruel prison life in Moscow and Siberia. Father Walter Ciszek, one of the 150 Jesuit priests who answered the call of Pope Pius XI, who in 1929 was concerned with the fact that the Soviet atheistic communist movement had captured the minds of more people in 30 years than the Catholic Church has been able to educate in 2000. As a result, Pope Pius XI called upon the Jesuits, the Marine Corps of the Catholic Church, to take on a special mission to determine what Catholic action could be taken against this way of life that was denying the free will of man and God. Of the Jesuits who entered the Soviet Union, Father Ciszek was the only one to return. Entering into Russia in 1940 from Albertin, Poland, Father Ciszek bypassed Moscow and moved into the Ural Mountains. After 1 year, he was captured and imprisoned in the city of Perm for 3 months, transferred to Moscow for 5 years, and then to the Arctic Circle of Siberia in the town of Dudinka for 10 years. After prison life, he was restricted to Norilsk for 3 years, and then to Krasnoyarsk, and his final detention in Abakan for 5 years prior to the 1963 move to Moscow, and his exchange for Mr. Igorov, a Soviet spy in the United States. The USSR, our ally in 1941, treated this American priest with brutal physical punishment for 5 years in Moscow by rubber hose beatings, starvation, snapping rubber bands on the body, dope, and special head pressure devices. His cellmates, a Nazi general, SS troops, refugees, thieves, and murderers succumbed to Soviet treatment or committed suicide. Coal mines in 65 degree below zero Siberian weather for 10 years. Rock quarries, prison revolts, starvation, and suicide. Father Ciszek never suffered a day of illness. Indeed, God was watching over him. Baptisms, confessions, and communions during and after prison life, Father Ciszek, always a priest, carried on his difficult mission. Father Ciszek will now briefly answer some questions. Father Ciszek, with 5 years of inhuman treatment in the Moscow prisons, to what do you owe your ability to survive?
My ability to survive in the prisons of Moscow, I credit to my faith and a constant effort to keep psychologically balanced.
Father, what was your purpose for entering Russia?
My purpose of entering Russia was strictly religious and only religious.
Father Ciszek, how many people were arrested, that is, executed or sent to prison by the Soviets?
According to rough estimations, there was about 20 to 30 million people arrested, put in prisons, and sent to concentration camps during the Stalin period.
Father Ciszek, how many other Catholic priests did you meet while you were in prison?
I met 14 Catholic priests and many Orthodox priests.
How brutal was the interrogation in the Moscow prison?
Moscow prison, they used moral force, physical force, even doped me and others in order to make you admit the charge they have put against me.
How long are the winters in Siberia?
According to Russian sayings, they say 13 months of winter and the rest summer.
Father Ciszek, they made you a member of the Communist Workers' Union, which makes you an atheist. How did you react?
Well, I was forced to enter the labor union. My reaction was that the propaganda they made to the workers was very superficial and unscientific.
How many Russians did you baptize?
In a year and 3 months, 3 of us priests baptized over 800 children.
Father Ciszek, who was instrumental in getting you out of Russia?
My sister was instrumental, also the Society of Jesus, Mrs. James, who worked in the State Department, and the deceased President John F. Kennedy.
How many communists are there in the Soviet Union today?
There are 12 million communists in the Soviet Union and 22 million Komsomol youth.
What is wrong with communism?
There are 2 errors in the communistic system. That is, enforced atheism on all, and it is also against the free will of man.
Father, what does the trial of the 2 Soviet authors reveal to you?
Reveals, for the first time in the history of the Soviet Union, that men who were brought up by the communists themselves have spoken outright what they have seen, what they have lived, and what they thought. They have smuggled books into the West, and in these books they have written that the Soviet Union is a country of thieves, drunkards, and illegitimate children. They asserted that, and they defended themselves to the very end. The jury and the court did not condemn what they said, but they made a remark that smuggling books into the West gave an incentive and motive to the capitalists to increase their propaganda against the Soviet Union.
Father, what is the big problem between Russia and China? Is there any possibility of war?
In the ideology, there is no substantial difference between China and the Soviet Union, except in tactics and strategy. The essential difference between the 2 countries is a political issue. and it is that China wants Soviet territory, and this might lead eventually in the future to a war between these two countries.
Father, the United States has been active in combat in Korea, in Vietnam, and in other areas of combat, active combat. What is your opinion of our action?
Well, we must look at the war in Vietnam as a fact. Looking at it in this manner, we should cooperate with the government because there is an involvement in this war of communism and the United States and all the Western countries taken together.
Father, will the educated non-communists be able to stop communism in Russia?
There is a fermentation of mind in Russia amongst the youth, amongst the intellectuals, also amongst the workers. Will the regime existing now in the Soviet Union be able to control this new critical attitude that is taken by these people in regard to the government and to the party? It remains to be seen. This tells us of the future of the communistic regime in the Soviet Union.
Father, we hear of the profit motive being innovated into the Russian system. Will this change their communistic system?
The profit motive will not change the system. It is used simply as a material incentive for better work and also as a moral incentive to be more dedicated to communistic ideals.
Now that you're back in the United States since 1963, do you believe we Americans are soft?
When I came back to the United States, I had the impression that the American people were soft. But after being here for 1 year and coming in contact with the people, especially with the youth, I have realized that they are capable of doing great things. Especially when I saw the Olympic Games over the TV in Los Angeles and in Tokyo, it changed my opinion.
How effective is Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty?
Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty have an influence on the Soviet people in this way, that they are looking for outside information and anything that is profitable to them in their system. Though they are critical, they receive that information with great interest.
Father, what advice do you have to the American people for them to combat communism as individuals?
American people, realizing what they have, as no other nation in the world has, they should be dedicated first of all to the country, to the church, also to build up their families solidly, and as much as is possible to eradicate all our social injustices. And in this way we will combat effectively communism and its propaganda.
Father, what is the future of communism in Russia?
The future of communism in Russia depends upon the effectiveness of the regime and of the party to be able to enforce the policies in the regime they have thus far enforced upon the people.
What is your opinion of the new Soviet leaders? Do they want war?
You Soviet leaders do not want war. They want peace, coexistence with subversion, and at the same time they are preparing with intensity for any event of war.
We have a number of extremist groups in the United States, both on the left and on the right. Do you believe that they are assisting the United States?
All extremists are not helping to combat communism because every exaggeration, whether it is in a religious order, whether it is in a party, whether it is in a country, is a wrong and eventually can develop into an evil.
Father, have you had an opportunity to meet the youth in the United States? what is your opinion of the American youth?
The youth in the United States do not like to be called soft. Yet there are very many good qualities in our youth. They are very well dedicated to social work, church work, to the country, and emphasizing this in them and helping them to develop these qualities, we will prepare our youth to be very effective in the future work that awaits them.
Father Ciszek, did you ever get to meet President Kennedy?
No, I never got to meet President